Hello and welcome to the Michael Clark Show podcast, where every Wednesday I'll bring you an interview with a different special guest. Many will be from the world of sport. All of them have a story worth sharing. In a time when doom and gloom is all too easy to find, this is a place where we'll be promoting the positive. So I hope you'll keep me company each week as I explore where our guests get their motivation and inspiration from to succeed. Well, we're back once again. Thank you for joining us on the Michael Clark Show podcast, and a returning guest. Really, really pleased that we can do this. Owen Coyle, great to have you back on.
Michael, I'm absolutely delighted to be back on. Obviously, we spoke for a length of time, but I don't think we get half the stuff covered. So, listen, great to chat with football with you, and it's always nice when, particularly somebody yourself, has got a great platform of knowledge and you're steeped in the game. So, it's great to chat, pal.
No, it's really, really good having you on. But before we get into it, anything new or strange you're starting with yourself? Obviously, in these times, UK's kind of opening back up, but obviously India, where you're managing at the moment. I know you're home, but where you're managing in India, things not so good.
No, obviously it's been, India's been ravaged with the COVID situation. We have to remember there's a population of 1.3 billion. It's the population is huge and lovely people. So hopefully, that corrects itself and picks itself up, and God willing, nobody's losing their lives, and hopefully with the size of the country they can get to the vaccination point that it makes everybody a lot safer, God willing. So again, we'll just await word. At the moment, obviously the football's secondary. It's more important that people stay well and healthy. So let's see what happens on that.
Very well said. Just a bit of housekeeping on my part. This is part 2 of the interview, as we just alluded to. If you've missed part 1, go and seek that out first of all. We love chronological order, so go and do that. This will follow up nicely for that. This is your dessert, if you like. There's plenty of places we could go with this, Owen, but just in the week that's in it, probably worth giving a shout out to St Johnstone. What a season.
Do you know what? It's amazing. It really is. And Callum's somebody I know well and get a lot of time for. But St Johnstone's a brilliant club because, certainly from my experience, a very young manager, they gave me an opportunity. And the chairman, Jeff Brown, at the time, Steve, his son, is now the chairman. But they allow you to cut your teeth and you make a mistake as long as you learn from it. And if you think about it, obviously, after I left, obviously Derek McInnes, who was my player coach, and when I'd said recommended Derek for the job, Derek did the job. And they've had outstanding managers all the way through. Derek, Stevie Lomas, Big Tommy, Callum, it's been a conveyor belt of boys that have just went there and done well. And a lot of that is because it's such a good club. They've allowed you the platform to do that, and they've given you the support. Now, they'll never ever have the biggest budget or anywhere near it in terms of the league. But what they do have is they have stability. They give managers support. And when you have that, you always have a chance of success. And listen, it's great to see an unbelievable achievement. If you think, I think it's only twice before it's been done, and that was by Aberdeen. But when Aberdeen done it, Aberdeen were the top team in the country. For St Johnstone to win 2 trophies, it's incredible.
It has been remarkable following their success, and I don't know what the bookies were offering at the start of the season for a St Johnstone double, but somebody's rich.
Oh. Well, even on that, I mean, that just shows you how football could change. St Johnstone lost 7 of the first 9 games, and at that point, people would have been complaining about Callum and giving him a stick, but that's what I say when St Johnstone's it's a proper club. They know he was a good manager, they know he needed a bit of time to bed things in, and all of a sudden you get them up and running, you get that momentum, and everything's there for everyone to see. I mean, it's just a wonderful, wonderful football story.
How different did you find it managing in the top tier of Scotland versus managing in the top tier of England? People could have a guess at what that's like, but you've done it.
With all due respect, I mean, whatever level you work at, football's the same game. Same game. What it is different levels. And the higher the levels you go, Michael, then the pace and the power becomes really prevalent to go along with the ability. And if you consider the English Premier League, when I was in it, and you look at it now, the Champions League final, the Europa League, it's the best league in the world. So when you're in the best, you're working with the best players. You're competing against the best coaches, the best managers, and that's no disrespect to anywhere else. So it's still the same game. So wherever you are, the object, of course, is to get the best out of your players and build that team. Now, obviously, being in the Premier League, taking Burnley in as I did, then that's probably the smallest budget in the league. When you go to Bolton, it's still down in the lower echelons of the big budgets in the league. So you're always kind of punching above your weight and competing against the top elite teams. But it's a challenge that we all love. And, regardless of what level you're at, we love being involved in football. And we're very blessed and fortunate to have had that in our career. So, listen, loved every minute of it. Wherever I coach, wherever I work, I just love the fact we're involved in the game. But it's always nice, of course, when you're competing at the elite level. And the Premier League it's the best league in the world.
How much as a manager comes down to your mentality? Because as players, you have to have that confidence and that self-belief that you can take to the big stage. As a manager, as you progress up, is that true of you as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think first and foremost, you've got to believe in your own ability. You've got to believe that you're capable, of doing the job, delivering success for everybody, and imparting your knowledge and experience, your wisdom, whatever you want to call it. And obviously on how you want to play and your philosophy and everything else. And when you do that, and equally, when you've got good players help you to achieve that. All comes together. And of course, winning games helps a coach to achieve that as well, because everybody then buys into it. Somebody could have the best philosophy in the world and the best understanding of the game, but for whatever reason they're not winning games, then sometimes one or two might be a little bit reluctant because they're not winning games. But all of a sudden, you're winning games and everybody's the life and soul of the party. That's why I always say, Michael, people talk about, when they win things. Oh, we've got unbelievable team spirit, camaraderie, everything together. The true test of team spirit is it's in the difficult moments. It's when you're not winning. That's when you see the true team spirit. That's when you see the strength of the men, the characters you've got. It's dead easy when you're winning. Everybody's singing, dancing, enjoying what they're doing. When you have those difficult moments, that's who you see stands up to be counted. And that's when I would judge anybody's team spirit, in the difficult moments.
And that's when you find out how good your player recruitment's been as well.
Yeah, well, player recruitment has become paramount now, because it really is. And the other thing as well, because of social media, because of all different platforms, everything's scrutinised. I always remember Sir Alex saying to me, he said, Owen, in terms of recruitment, and this is at Manchester United, where Sir Alex has signed, as you know, some of the best players in the world. He says, Owen, if you're getting 6 or 7 out of 10 correct in the recruitment, you're doing very well. Because when you admire players, you don't know as much as you know a little bit, you do your background checks and everything else, until they come into your building, you don't know how do they settle in, what's their characteristics, all the little bits and pieces. And sometimes fantastic players come. And I always say this about Glasgow Celtic, Glasgow Rangers. Over the years, those clubs have signed some fantastic players, but they've not always done well, because sometimes the mentality at Celtic and Rangers is you have to win every game, and some players can't cope with that. So it's not always the best players that come in and settle into those environments. So I think the important thing is it's getting the right players that fit into what you want to do. And just to your point there, if you get the recruitment right, you've got a fantastic chance of achieving success.
Is that a big thing for you when you're looking at potential clubs and, that whole process of applying for a job as a manager? You have to find a club that will allow you the influence in those areas and not just say, right, we've got A, B and C, here you go.
Yeah, football's changed. The game has evolved dramatically. And there's all different setups at different clubs now. Some managers' role, or whatever your head coach, it's kind of, some of it's diluted, some of it's more, depending where you go. So I think as a manager, you want to be in control of the stuff that decides your destiny, if that makes any sense, because people are quick to change managers. So if it's going to be, let it be because of what you've contributed, not because of somebody else's part in it. So I think that's the bit we all crave, that we can have certainly substantial enough control that we can make the decisions that relate to us in terms of building your team and how you want to progress. Understanding finance plays a huge part, but you want to have a big say in who you're bringing in and the bits of the jigsaw when you're putting it all together.
Has it changed massively if you think back to when you got into management versus the world around us now?
I think a huge part of it is social media, because everybody loves the game, but everybody's got an opinion, and necessarily not watching games. But it's easy. No, but it is. It's easy to jump on the bandwagon. People, but that's just part of the game. The one thing we are in football as players and all the way through, we're certainly thick-skinned. We certainly understand that there's going to be that criticism, whether it be constructive or otherwise. So it's something we take on board. You don't, as long as you know in your own mind what you want to do and how you go about it, that's what you focus. I always say, if it's outside noise, let them get on with it, do what they do, but you make sure you control what you can, and that's getting the best team in the field to win games for your football club. Because it's not really, sometimes it's not just a football club you represent. Sometimes it's a town, a city, a lot of people, a lot of expectations. So it's not something any of us as managers, head coaches, we certainly don't take it lightly. We pour our hearts and our souls into the job because we love the game. I mean, I always say the best days of your life are your playing days. That's your best days of your life as a player. But when you get a bit older, as I do, and the legs are a bit slower, of course, it's a natural evolvement for me into coaching, into management. And when you're in there, you want to make sure, because if you think about it as a player, if you play well, the manager picks you. Because managers don't leave players out that are playing well. If you're playing but all of a sudden, when you become that head coach, you're responsible for everybody. Not just when you were as a player, play well, stay in the team. You're responsible, I mentioned there, sometimes huge cities and everything else. So that's a big responsibility. But listen, we absolutely love the game and we do everything in our power to be successful.
How stressful are those transfer windows? We know TV companies love to do countdowns and everyone starts to go, only an hour left and they still need a striker or what have you. What's that like on the other end of it?
Well, I've got to say I'm not a big lover of them, only because obviously the clubs I managed at the level that I was at with them, they weren't the bigger clubs in those leagues. So all of a sudden you're there for the picking. The big clubs come and they pick you off and you have very little time to recover. And obviously I had a couple of bad experiences of that. For example, at Wigan, I had James McCarthy, and we knew that Everton were coming to buy him. Obviously worked with Roberto, so we knew that Roberto was coming in to buy him. And Roberto waited till 11:30 p.m, 30 minutes before the deadline, to agree the sum that we'd already told him for 5 weeks before that. So of course I'd given the boy a word that if they got to that I would allow him to go, which I did. He went to Everton, but then we'd half an hour, and maybe the club were pleased by that. They didn't get a chance to spend the money, but then that hurts me as a manager because they've lost a player at £15 million in James McCarthy, the best player in the league at that time, and you can't replace him. So, and then the other one, of course, was when I lost Gary Cahill in the January window, although it wasn't at the last minute, but it was because he was going to be out of contract this summer. The club wanted to take the money for him. I suggested not to take it because the sum they were receiving, £6 million, Gary was a £20 million player. But if they didn't take that, they were getting nothing. But it'd have been more value for me to the club to stay. But they decided they were taking the £6 million, plus I think it was £1 million add-on if Chelsea won the league, which they did. So it ended up, I think, 7 in total. But this was a player that was worth 3 and 4 times that, So, but that's what happens when you're at a smaller club. You're there for the big clubs to come and dictate. So in terms of transfer windows, no, I prefer the old-fashioned system. But there we go. That's the nature of football.
It certainly is, and imagine at 11:30 at night when you're getting word that McCarthy's on his way, you're not exactly singing and dancing.
Well, to be fair to James was sitting out. James was sitting outside Everton's training ground from 8 p.m. that night, waiting for the deal to get concluded. And Everton, to be fair, they added a little bit on. They knew the number from the outset, and eventually. And the reason I know, I mean, you might be aware of this, you might not. So in that deal, obviously Moyes a good friend of mine, David Moyes, who was manager of Manchester United at the time, and Moyes was buying Fellaini from Everton. So of course Moyes is phoning me saying, have they signed McCarthy yet? And I'm saying, no. Have you got Fellaini yet? Because it's all tied in. But the thing about it is, Moyes takes Fellaini, Moyes is happy, and Roberto takes McCarthy. I was at the bottom of the food chain at Wigan, because the big clubs were taking that from that from that. And then the smaller club at the time was getting 30 minutes to try. You had no chance of getting a player in that time. So all the way through, so Moyes is saying to me, right, well, yeah, we're close to getting Fellaini. It's not quite done, but we're getting there. And of course, Everton are waiting to agree Fellaini before they then want to agree James. And unfortunately, it happened that late at night, and we were the ones that were affected by it.
So when you're the lower end of the Premier League, you need really good negotiators, don't you, in those boardrooms, because you don't have as much money to play with, and so you know that you're up against it right away.
Well, you're up against it more if you're running out of time. I mean, if it's planned, of course, then, as you normally do, you kind of plan the window. Who do you need? Where do you get them? But when it gets closer to those, it's a certain specific point, boom, after that you can't do anything. Then I think the smaller clubs are up against it, as opposed to the big clubs on a whim can go out and spend huge sums of money. But the ones at that time were obviously trying to be careful in what they're doing.
Have you got, obviously you've alluded to a couple of times there where it can go against you as a manager, and we're all human nature. I suppose we always remember those times you're left kicking yourself. Have you a couple of times where you thought, I've landed an unbelievable deal, how have we got him for this price?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's been a couple of great deals like that, but also as well, I was very fortunate that the managers in the Premier League I had a great relationship with, because they've seen how my teams played, Burnley, Bolton, and from that I was able to utilise the loan market. So I mean, I gave Jack Wilshere his Premier League debut at 17 years of age because I had a good relationship with Arsene Wenger. I was able to go to Arsenal, and Arsene gave me on loan. I was able to get Daniel Sturridge, who is a great lad, played every game for me, never missed a training session, and that's what I found quite sad later on, because Jack and Daniel never missed a game, never missed a training session, and they were both blighted, in their careers with injuries, because the two of those boys were like the potential to be, world-class players. These two kids were sensational, but I was very fortunate that they'd mesmerising spells for me at Bolton Wanderers, and that comes through building up, people seeing what you're doing and having those good relationships. The funny thing with Arsenal, my first game against Arsenal was the FA Cup against Arsenal, obviously for Burnley, and we were to play them at Turf Moor, and Big Kyle after get sent off in the game. We ended up losing the game 2-0, but we played really well. And after the game, Arsene's interview, he said, "Oh, Burnley were outstanding. They belie their championship position. I'd just taken over, I think 6 weeks earlier." He said their speed of passing, their aggressiveness, the quality of football, they gave us a real game today, and we're delighted to leave 2-0 victors. Bear in mind with 10 men for a lot of the game. So, fine. Then the following October, we played Arsenal at Turf Moor again in the quarter-final of the Carling Cup. And we beat Arsenal 2-0. Big Kevin McDonald, who's in the news just now because he's getting a replacement kidney. Big Kevin's at Fulham. He's not played since last year. God willing, I wish him well with the kidney. I think his brother's given his kidney for him. So I hope that goes really well, Kevin. And great lad. He scored the 2 goals that night. Big Kevin was unplayable. So we beat Arsenal 2-0, and Arsene does his interview, and Arsene says, "Oh, that's the poorest team we've played in the competition." So my point is, he's such like us all. You want to win that much, but he's won 2-0, and he waxes lyrical about how good the team were. But when we beat him 2-0, they can't, because you've got that in you that he does. You don't want to be complimentary, but we were outstanding. 1-2-0. Obviously, as you know, went to play Tottenham in the semi-final in a 2-legged affair. But I had a great relationship with him. He knew how we played. We wanted to pass and move. And it kind of fell into how he wanted to develop his players. So much so that summer, I thought I was getting Jack back. Jack played 6 months for us, which was unbelievable. And I'm speaking to Arsene nearly every other day. "Oh, when can I get Jack in for pre-season?" No, you get him on. We're going to play a pre-season tournament that they always do. So they went and played the pre-season tournament. They had Fabregas, they had the Nielsen. They had world-class players in the middle of the park. And I thought this could happen, and it did. Jack was the best player in the tournament. Jack Wilshere was outstanding in the pre-season tournament. And Arsene called and says, "Owen, I'm really sorry. I need to keep him. I need to build my team around him. This boy is special," which I knew. I'd worked with him for 6 months and seen it in the Premier League. And I said, "Listen, I understand that. Can you let him give me up to Christmas just for 6 months?" And he said, "No, I'm sorry. He's going to start for me every week." So that was Jack. So in terms of transfers and stuff like that, Jack Wilshere, Daniel Sturridge, outstanding.
Really interesting hearing about those little interpersonal relationships with managers. Supporters don't necessarily see that. Obviously, the media can, to an extent, get an aspect of that, but to hear it from you, I guess it's important as a manager to have those relationships, particularly if you're relying on loan deals.
Well, listen, 100%. I've got to say, in Sir Alex, I was finishing off my UEFA Pro licence, and we were finished off at the Euros, which were in Switzerland. I think it was in Switzerland, the finals. And anyway, I was there on the Pro licence, Big Jim Fleeton, and we bumped into Martin Ferguson outside the stadium. Martin was coming into the game. I think it was Greece and Croatia we were going to watch. And Big Jim Fleeton chatting away to Martin. Martin says to me, "Owen, how are you?" And funny enough, when I was 19, I was a part-time player at Dumbarton. So I worked with a company called Ludden Construction, and they're still there in Glasgow, 1497 Balmore Road, Glasgow. Still there, Ludden Construction. And then Martin Ferguson, Martin used to come in. Martin was he was a tyre salesman. So I knew Martin from when I was a young kid. So he said to me, "Oh, young Coyle, how are you? But great to see you." I says, "Oh, going away, reminiscing, going away back." So he was in really good form, Martin. I said, "Martin, I've got a favour to ask you." He said, "What's that?" I says, Go to phone Sir Alex for me." He says, "What?" He says, "I can't phone him. He's on his holidays. It's pre-season." I said, do me a favour, will you?" He says, "Oh, see for you." So anyway, he's phoned him. He says, "Alex, Martin," and they can hear him down the end. "What are you phoning?" He said, "I'm just getting into this, Greece and Croatia game." He said, "I've met young Owen Coyle. It's at Burnley now." And I can hear Sir Alex saying, "Oh, great, he's doing great, And he said, "Well, he's wanting a word." So I'll put him on. So I go on. I said, "Listen, sorry to bother you." And I said, "I'd love to actually, I want to sign Chris Eagles." He said, "Right, tell you what you do." He said, "Phone me July the 4th. I said, "What?" He said, "I'm on my holidays. Phone me July the 4th. He says, "And I'll speak to you then." He says, "But I've got it in my mind. We'll have a chat." I says, "Right, great. Thank you very much. Come off the voice." I said to Martin, "Brilliant. Thanks. I really appreciate that." So, of course, I'm counting down the days, July the 4th. So I phoned him July the 4th, first day back at pre-season. And he said, I said, "It's Owen." He says, "Hi, son. I was expecting your call." I says, "All right." I said, "It's about Chris Eagles." He says, "Right, okay. I'll do a deal with you for him." And I'm thinking, "Oh, amazing. I love the Eagles." And he says, "Right." He says, "But I'm taking him to South Africa with me on the pre-season tour because we've got 1 or 2 injuries to the senior players. But when he comes back, then you can have him. I'll give you my word, give you the terms of the deal, speak to your chairman, get that sorted." And to be fair, he was giving us a lesser price than what Eagles was worth. He was doing me a real favour. So I said to the board, our board are ecstatic at Burnley. "Brilliant, yeah, let's get it done." So, of course, they go to South Africa. Is Eagles not the best player in the tour? He's the top scorer. I'm watching it, Mike, I'm watching every game. I'm like, "Oh, no. So anyway, sure enough, Eagles finished the top scorer in the tour and he comes back. I phoned Sir Alex. I says, "It's on." He went, "He was brilliant, son, wasn't he?" I went, Yes, he was." He said, "But listen, no, I gave him a word." He said, "Because the boy needs to play and I've got all the big hitters coming back in and he might be on the bench here and there, but he needs to develop. I need to be fair to the boy." So I thought, it just showed you his duty of care. That as much as he wanted to win, he could have kept the Eagles, come off the bench 20 minutes here and there, but he wanted the boy to develop, have a good career, which he went on to do. So I thought that was the measure of the man. So we agreed the deal. Chris Eagles came to Burnley, and the Eagles played a huge part in getting Burnley promoted. He was outstanding for us that season.
What a relief he didn't add on an extra $500,000.
No, well, that was a good thing about him. He told me before he was going to South Africa what the deal was going to be. Checked with my chairman, they'd okayed it. So, and he was outstanding. And even that season, he would send me text messages, "Keep it going, young Coy. I'm watching out, doing what." And it's just so nice when you think of somebody who's probably one, if not been the best in the whole world, that he's got enough time for young managers, and that's a huge thing about him. He's outstanding in that way, Sir Alex.
We spoke on the last podcast we did together about, ultimately the decision to move away from Burnley, but it's clear talking about it now that you still look back very fondly on your time there.
Oh, listen, I can never praise Burnley Football Club enough. And the huge part of Burnley Football Club is the fans. Because coming from Glasgow and playing with some provincial clubs in Scotland, if I was getting into Motherwell or Dundee to play for Dundee United, there'd be buses leaving to go and support Celtic and Rangers from those cities. But when you walk into Burnley, all you see is Burnley tops, not Manchester United, not Liverpool, everybody at Burnley through and through. And that's a huge part of the club, the fabric of the club. And the fans, I mean, we turned Turfmoor into a fortress, and the fans played a huge part in that. And part of the reason I got the job is there probably wasn't a lot of home wins prior to that, because Steve Cotterill had done a good job. Steve Cotterill was a very good manager. Stroh's been a really nice man. But he stopped winning at home, and the fans are so passionate about their team. And when we came in, just went from strength to strength, and we understood, coming from the Gorbals, I'm a working class boy myself, I understood the mentality, the people, what they wanted, and every one of us, Brendan Flood was a huge part of bringing me to the club. Brendan was the one that was, he put so much money in Burnley. If it wasn't for him, they would have struggled financially to keep going. So he was an outstanding man. And with Brendan, it was like a kindred spirit. And he's right when he always said that when everybody is aligned, you have a great chance of having success in football. And that was the case at Burnley. Everybody wanted the same thing. There was nobody was differentiating. Everybody was in the same path. We all knew we wanted. We all strived to get there. Took a lot of hard work, a lot of ability, a lot of quality as well. But my goodness, what a fantastic experience! Wonderful club. I could nothing but positive things to say about them. Don't get me wrong. I've been back a couple of times, got a bit of stick off in fans in games, but that's part and parcel of football. They love their club. They love their club. They're passionate about the club, and it's a huge part. You see it now. The job that Sean's done. Sean Dyche, outstanding man, wonderful manager, and you see what he's built at Burnley. And they've missed the fans this year, but they've done well, obviously, even without them. I always think when the Burnley fans are there, it certainly gives you an added lift at Turf Moor.
Most certainly, and interesting what they've done as well with a partnership with a few clubs, Portadown, Ayr United, Cove Ramblers and Clondudno. A strategic partnership, sounds very fancy, but ultimately it's helping to grow those clubs and probably grow their talent ID and find those little nuggets from across the UK and Ireland.
I think it's brilliant. I think because those clubs benefit from, obviously, Burnley, a Premier League club, the affiliation, the tie-up. But equally, you're right. And it also gives, from somebody at those clubs I discovered as a kid, a pathway to elite football. Ultimately, if you're good enough, because that's always a challenge. You have to be good enough to attain that level. But I think it's a very clever incentive from Burnley. Obviously, the new owners have come in. And from my experience in America, I know they'll have different slants on things because, they're fantastic at what they do. So I think that could be, and the other thing as well from Burnley point of view, they've said that they'll back Sean in transfer window this summer. So that augurs well for Burnley and the fans that there might be some exciting signings. So, yeah, I think it's really positive.
I know you've happy memories of Bolton too. That when we finished the last podcast, though, a Bolton fan messaged me and said, I know it's probably still sore to talk about, but the game against Stoke, can you make sure you ask him?
Well, I've got to say, the game against Stoke was an absolute travesty. It was the last game of the season, and that season's remembered for the Aguero goal, because Aguero scored to win the league, obviously against Queen's Park Rangers. So we drew at Stoke. Had we won at Stoke, we stayed up. And I've got to tell you, if there was VAR, then Stoke City would never have scored the goal. The first goal was Walters, who bundled Adam Bogdan over the line. It was back in the old 50s when the centre forward used to just bars the goalkeepers over the line. And the second one, Big Crouchy, had took a bad touch. And Adam Bogdan came and Crouchy overhit it and just fell down over him. And Chris Foy, I think, was the referee, and they gave a penalty. So that game was, I've got to say, I love my time. And we done fantastic at Bolton because we were cutting back every year because obviously the club owed a lot of money. Mm-hmm. I wasn't aware when I came in, they owed over £100 million. Most of it was to the owner, Eddie Davis at the time, but it was still owed. So the budget was cut every year. We were selling good players. We mentioned Gary Cahill there, who'd left in January. We had 4 cruciate ligament injuries that year. It was incredible. Chung Young Lee had a double leg break. I remember even the game, 3 games before the end of the season, we were beating West Brom 1-0 at home. David Wheater, obviously, nobody near him, gets injured. That was the year Fabrice had collapsed at White Hart Lane against Tottenham in the Cup. Chung Young Lee, a double leg break. Some of the injuries we had were horrendous. Stuart Holden had been just prior to that, the end of the season before. But it was remarkable the players took it to the last game of the season. And even then, with a fair wind, they would have stayed in the league. But because of, I think, 2 poor refereeing decisions, then, you lose your place in the league. Obviously, financially, that has a big impact in the club. So sometimes you better been lucky in football, but Bolton Wanderers certainly weren't lucky that day in the final game of the season at Stoke, that's for sure.
No. There were some real challenges that you faced at that club. Even when things were going well, you've set a bit of a picture there of what was going on behind the scenes. How far into the job were you before you realised that was happening?
So when I came into the job, Bolton Wanderers were bottom in the league. That was why the big furore was about obviously leaving Burnley to go to Bolton Wanderers at Bolton League. But I'd played at Bolton as a player. Anyway, we went in. We kept Bolton up with 9 points to spare, and we spent no money in the transfer window. I got Jack Wiltshire on loan. I get Vladimir Weiss on loan from Manchester City, and I get Stuart Holden on a Bosman from Houston Dynamo. So kept them up with 9 points. Went into the following season. We were in the top 6, top 7 for 3/4 of the season, having spent no money really because we're cutting back budget-wise. But the football we're playing, I think I won 2 or 3 Manager of the Month award. That was how good our football was. And then we get the Holden injury. Sam Ricketts get injured. And the problem is, because we were cutting back, we didn't have replacements like for like. So that was always going to have an effect. Into the following season, again, it was injury upon injury, cutting back budget-wise, but still being really competitive, winning games. And it took us to the last day of the season at Stoke, where, as I say, with a fair wind, we'd have stayed up. So I've got to say, had we done that, would have been the biggest achievement ever, because everything we've been through, cutting budgets, losing good players, lost Gary Hale in the January, all the stuff, the injuries, Fabrice and everything else, then it would have been amazing. So, I look back my time fondly, and we know how well we've done. And unfortunately, it was, a bad referee and took it away from us.
Those pesky referees, they'll find a way.
Well, I have to say, if there was VAR, we'd have been all right.
Referees definitely get a hard time. We were just talking before we started here. Obviously, you saw what happened in the Irish Cup semi-final last week, and I know you know Jonny Tuffey. But what did you make of that? Because that was a nightmare to commentate on, Owen. But what do you think with your experience?
Well, I understand how difficult it is for referees, first and foremost, because they're under tremendous scrutiny. I mean, they're people, their bosses are watching them, they're observers and everything else. And Jonny Tuffey, I know, he's been an outstanding goalkeeper all his days. I know from his time in Scotland, competing against me, somebody I always liked, unbelievable shot stopper. And really, I just think it's a bit of common sense. You've warned him, you gave him a yellow. You've got to remember, it's the semi-final of a cup. He's desperate to save those penalties for his team. I think he's just saying, listen, Johnny, a bit over-exuberant, you've got to just settle yourself down. Don't, I'll give you another chance, but that's it. Just a bit of common sense. And I think that's where it goes back to, I always said to the referees, when I played, there was a bit of banter, there was a bit of back and forth. And I think that helped, because then I felt as a player, that referee made a bad decision, but he's all right. He's given, there's a wee bit of, social skills, if you want to, there's a bit of interaction. And, as opposed to being dictated to, there's a bit of come and go. And I just think that little bit of common sense would help in those situations.
When, the personality thing, certainly when I think back, some referees you could see had a bit of fun with the players. Has that been sanitised out of football, do you think, particularly at the higher levels? Are referees allowed to have that bit of fun or, a cheekiness to them that they used to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about it. I wish they would. I wish they'd that personality, that banter. I mean, I remember playing, I think it was Rangers, playing Rangers one day, and Rangers had a really good team, but they had a few, hard men and boys that could look after themselves and, knock you about and all that. And Willie Young was the referee, and I think Terry Hurlock was playing, and getting a smash and coming for the Gorbals had something to say, and Terry Hurlock turned around and says, "Hey, I'll break your leg." Is that, I'll do it. It wasn't I'll break your leg, but I'll smash you, that type of thing. And I said to Willie Young, "Ref, did you hear that?" He says, "Yeah, but he wasn't talking to me." So he'd a brilliant bit of banter. It just diffused the whole situation so much. So Terry Hurlock started laughing. I'm laughing. All of a sudden, let's go on with it. So, when you've got something like that, I'm going to smash you. "Hey, ref, you hear that?" He says, "Yeah, but he wasn't talking to me. You better watch yourself." Brilliant. So, and that totally takes, when you've got somebody like that, a bit of charisma, a bit of character, I think that would help. Instead of being like robotic. And I understand those big pressures now, got to get decisions right, but surely they've got to enjoy themselves as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Sometimes you wonder with the assessors and the pressure on referees, do referees ever enjoy a game of football? I hope they do, but I'm not sure.
Well, I would hope they do. I would think referees enjoy a game of football when they're not when they're not being talked about after the game. I think that's a sign of a good referee, when there's no mention of him after the game, because the game's been allowed to ebb and flow. If he's had to make decisions, he's made them, but he's not become the talking point of the game, is the best way I could put it.
I have a degree of sympathy for fourth officials, though, because they tend to cop a lot of the flack for something they didn't do.
Well, I think that's why they were brought in. Again, if I'm a fourth official, I mean, I would make it easier on myself when the managers, the coaches are ranting, raving. I would turn around and say, "Do you know what? That's how it looked like for me from here." And then you've nowhere to go. Yeah, it looked like that. It looked like that to me as well. Then we'll get nowhere to go. Like, all right. So again, I think there's different ways that they can help themselves and still keep everybody right.
It's been amazing watching football with fans back again. We saw that in the Irish Cup final. I mean, that Linfield team looked so fired up. Within seconds, all the blood and thunder was back in the game. And no matter where you look, you can see the impact of fans. It's something that people have been talking about, but to see the difference in how football is played as soon as those spectators are back is marvellous.
No, listen, it's huge. I mean, we're all in the game because that's what we love. I mean, I remember Johnstone saying the game is nothing without fans. I always remember him saying you could have the best game in the world, but if there's no fans there to see it, it doesn't seem the same. And sometimes you can have a game that it's not the best game, but the atmosphere, because it's created by the fans, and it might be a competitive game, but there's so many things to enjoy about it for different reasons. There's no doubt the fans play a huge part. When they're vocal, colourful, getting behind their team, doing it in a nice way. Not talking about being nasty. I'm talking about out there supporting your team. I mean, I reminisce of hark-backs. I always remember that. Certainly when I was coming into the game and playing, I remember the days when opposition fans used to applaud, players from the other team because they were good players. That doesn't really happen these days. When fans are supporting their own team and getting behind them and making the game a real spectacle. But we certainly need the fans, absolutely.
What grounds for you hold that little bit of magic? There's certain places that for any of us, when we walk into, we can't help but kind of look around and breathe in the air and just soak in the moment a bit. Where are the special venues for you?
Well, I've got to say, from my playing days, as much as that, obviously, everybody knows Owen Coyle, I'm a Celtic man, but I loved playing at Ibrox. I thought it was a magnificent stadium. The pitch was always a bowling green. It was always in great condition. And obviously, I happened to do well there at different times, scored a number of goals, which I got a bit of stick for as well, I've got to tell you. But they were great days. But again, that was good banter. I had a really good pal, actually, Michael, and he was a big Rangers fan. And it was a time that Rangers had the enclosure behind the dugouts, and I was playing for Airdrie at the time, and I'd bumped into him during the week, and he says, "Oh, and I'll be behind the enclosure, behind the away dugout." And I says, "Oh, great." I says, "I'll look out for you." He says, "Yeah, no problem." So it was a Saturday. The warm up, I was always last off the field. So I'm coming off the warm up, and the boy's name was Davy, and I see him in with all his pals, but he's in with all the bears, before the game, and he's kind of reluctant to show out to me. So I've seen him and I've stopped. I says, "Oh, Davy, how are you?" And he's kind of grudgingly nodded his head. I says, "All right." I says, "I'll see you at Mass tomorrow, Davy." He's, "Oh, I don't go to Mass, he's at it, he's winding up." So it was absolutely brilliant. So just to see his face trying to explain to his pals, and he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't a Catholic or anything. I just thought I'd throw it in for a wee bit of banter. So it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Davey was found dead 2 hours later.
No, he was all right. Rangers went on to beat us, so he was okay.
Ibrox certainly, and when you've got a little run of goals there, that certainly helps. What about the Premier League grounds? Was there anyone in particular?
I think there's some of them are amazing grounds. I mean, I think as a kid growing up, everybody wants to be competing against Manchester United. That was that was a big name, wasn't it? I've got to say Arsenal Stadium. I mean, you could go through them all. Manchester City Stadium. I mean, they're just world class stadiums. They really are. I mean, it was a pleasure to compete at those levels against them, against good teams and good players. And obviously within that, you always try to achieve results. I remember actually drawing 3 each. We mentioned Kevin McDonald. I remember drawing 3 each at Manchester City. Robinho, all the big stars were playing. And we'd went 2-0 up. Manchester City came back to lead 3-2. And big Kevin McDonald popped up in the last minute, 93rd minute, to get us a 3 each draw. And just beautiful stadium. And actually, a funny story about that, Michael. The week before, my chief executive, Paul Fletcher, who'd played, he was a very good player, Paul, played at Burnley and Bolton and had a great career. And he said to me, Owen, I need a little bit of help in the boardroom. I said, what is it, Paul? He said, well, I want to get a couple of those lamps, that keep the grass, keep every sort of pit. And I said, right. He said, but, they're 20 odd grand. He says, can you help me in the board meeting that we need them? I said, yeah. He said, they'll just cover the 6-yard box. I said, no problem. So we get to the board meeting, any other business. And Fletch said, yeah, I was hoping to get a couple of lamps, cover the 6-yard box, keep the grass, keep the pitch looking good. And a couple of the older directors were like, oh, no, we don't need them. And I stepped in and I said, well, actually, we do need them, because if we want to be seen to be at the elite level and competing with all these top clubs, we need to be showing to be doing a little bit here to help the field so it looks in pristine condition, so that we represent the football club. And to be fair to Brendan Flood and Barry Kilby, the chairman, Brendan says, okay, let's get them, sign that off, let's get them done. So 4 days later, we got to play Manchester City, the game I'm talking about, the 3-each draw. And in Manchester City, you drive underneath the stadium. There's a big winding bit that takes you into where you park the bus and you come in the stadium underground. The whole way, Michael, down this 100-yard drive, either side in the 100-yard drive was all the lamps we're talking about. Manchester City had lamps that covered the whole field. We were trying to get 2 for the 6-yard box at Burnley. So that's the kind of level you're competing at. But wonderful stadium, really good people. I've got to say, fantastic club. Looked after us, as opposition. I think genuine class is the best way I could sum up. Everybody, the way they go about things at Manchester City.
I don't want to miss out your time at Houston Dynamo. It's something a little bit different, and obviously you're not afraid to take these adventures. Some would call them gambles, because everybody looks at football in the UK and you kind of know what you're getting there. When you step outside that bubble, who knows really? What was it like in America?
We loved it. Myself and Sandy, who's my assistant, we've been everywhere together. We loved our time in Houston. It was a challenge because, as I say, the family was back here at the time. They would come like every 6 weeks. Obviously, my son Owen is the head coach of England amputees, so he had that, and then obviously the girls. So, but football-wise, yeah, we really enjoyed it. There's a different type of structure because everybody's supposed to be at the same budget, but they're not, because the designated players, the big expensive players. So if you sign, you're allowed 3 at the time, but $450,000 of their salary comes off your salary cap. Everybody at that time, the salary cap was $3.5 million. But anything above $450,000, the owners pay the players that money themselves. The owners have got to pay that. So at Houston, we didn't have any designated players, so we're at $3.5 million. But Toronto, for example, had Michael Bradley, Giovinco, Jose Altidore. Now, the 3 of those boys earned $18 million between them. So Toronto's really working at $21 million, and we worked at $3 million. So ultimately, whatever league you go, Michael, the big clubs are the big clubs. There's going to be big spenders wherever you go. LA Galaxy, big clubs like that, Seattle Sounders, New York Red Bulls. So, but we loved it. We loved the time there.
What was it like? Did you live in Texas then?
Yeah, I bought as you do, bought a lovely big house in Houston, beautiful part of the world. To be fair to Sandy likes to sunbathe. He's the best man in Texas with all that and everything else, for when you go home, the downtime. Wonderful climate, as you know. Even when there was showers, it was still 80 degrees. There was tremendous humidity there. So much so that Houston, we obviously had to play their games in the evening when it would try to cool a little bit, because you couldn't play in the afternoon because of the intense heat. But no, lovely part of the world and really good, Michael.
And in terms of like the knowledge of the sport, because soccer, as I'll call it, it's growing, and it's grown quite quickly. But even just a few years ago, it wasn't where it's at now. What was that like stepping into?
It was good because you're right. At the time, soccer was still behind. Soccer, bit by bit, started to creep up. I would suggest to challenging those other sports now. You know, your basketball and your baseball and those other ones. And it's certainly moving up the rankings, that's for sure. I mean, the amount of kids that play it, you know, both, as you know, they're the world champions in the women's football. And all the kids that play it, both girls and boys, it's fantastic to see. So there's no doubt it'll continue to grow, it'll continue to get better. And the Americans, the nature of the mentality they have, they won't stop until they're the best at things. That's what they do. So, no, all credit to them. It's getting better all the time.
And when you came back from America, you thought, I'll go for something nice and easy like Blackburn Rovers.
Well, you know, only because, I mean, I was offered other jobs and obviously Blackburn was right on my doorstep. I didn't know at the time that they were going to sell. I didn't know they were going to sell all their best players. You know, Duffey and Hanley went for 12 million straight away to Newcastle and Merlin and Newcastle and Brighton and no money to replace them. Then even in January, Ben Marshall, they sold to Wolves. So we sold about £15 million of players. And the only money I spent was £200,000 on Derek Williams, who went on to play for Republic of Ireland, as you know. And he actually ended up the player of the year. So, again, in difficult circumstances, we did really well with some of the terrific players we brought in. Danny Graham, Charlie Mulgrew, all on free transfers. We wheeled and dealed. And so, yeah, that's the nature of football. And obviously for them, a little bit of help. There's a friend of mine in Ross County, a few months to help them up there. And then obviously now working away in India. So we're loving what we do. We're very fortunate in football, as we say, that to have your career in it. And as I said before, we're very blessed and love every minute of it.
Yeah, your energy is infectious, Owen, and it really is a testament to yourself. And obviously that is how you're able to have that staying power, because it's a game that you would burn both ends of the candle very quickly. It's fair to say, certainly as a football manager.
Absolutely. And the thing with football is, Michael, as you know, 1 minute you're the best thing since sliced bread. Next minute, you know, you've not got a clue and you're a dumpling and everything else you want to call it. The truth is, we've all got a good knowledge of the game. We know our games. Players help you to achieve wonderful things. The perfect example, actually, we spoke about at the top of the programme. Now, Tommy Wright's a great friend of mine and an outstanding man and a terrific football manager. Done an unbelievable job, as you know, at St Johnstone. Won the Scottish Cup with St Johnstone. Had them in Europe and everything else. Obviously left and Callum's come in and St Johnstone's had a remarkable season. Tommy goes in to help Kilmarnock and they can't keep them up. Now, that shouldn't change anybody's opinion of Tommy Wright. Tommy Wright's an outstanding manager, outstanding football man and knows the game. Sometimes that happens in football, but people don't kind of get their head around that. They just see this as black and white. Oh, you've won, so you're good, and you've lost, so you're not. That's not the case. But obviously being in the game, we certainly know what we're capable of doing. As I said before, you don't be in the game this long without being very good at what you do.
Here, here. Last one from me before I let you go. Are you going to get Instagram? Even Jose Mourinho's on it.
Well, I seen it Jose on it, and I think I'll leave it because look what happened to him.
Very well said.
But now, again, I mean, that's something. Just on that, Michael, as well. You mentioned Blackburn Rovers. My last game for Blackburn was against Manchester United and Jose Mourinho. And people have this, when they look at him, they have this idea of, or they make their mind up about him.
Yeah. I've
got to tell you, when I came out, the boys got out to warm up and he was just outside standing in the corridor. I said, "Want to come in for a bottle of water, a cup of tea or whatever?" And he went, "Yeah, I'll do that." So we went in and he sat with me for 25 minutes. And I've got to say, an outstanding man, somebody I really enjoyed chatting away about, not just about football, but things and very worldly, but really, really loved his company, enjoyed the chat. Obviously, when the game starts, we're going hell for leather, both of us, to win the game, but it was a side of him that we'll get to see. And, you know, he had a real warm, a real lovely, lovely qualities, and somebody I was really taken by in that, in those 25 minutes. So really enjoyed his company. So just when you mentioned his name, I thought it'd be remiss not to let people know that he's a lovely, lovely man.
No, I love that. Do you know what? We need to get you into a sideline of politics here. It seems you can get on with every manager, every man. So that's pretty beneficial. Vote Owen. Thank you for listening to the Michael Clark Show podcast. You can follow me at mclarkshow on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Check back every Wednesday for a brand new episode, which you can download as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also watch the entire interview via my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/The Michael Clark Show. And if you like our theme song, it has been kindly provided by the brilliant SX70. Search for SX-70 on Spotify to stream their music. Until next Wednesday, take care. I'll speak to you soon.